On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how committed is the company you work for to a culture that innovates in a way that cares for you? When innovation and caring combine, the work culture is beyond positive. It's irresistible. I am so stoked to introduce you to my guest today, Work Positive Nation. The first article I read of hers was over 20 years ago. My immediate response was yes. She's a management innovator and pioneer. She's the co-creator of ROWE. And we're going to find out what that acronym ROWE stands for and how you can row in your company culture. So get ready to row, Work Positive Nation.
Welcome to the Work Positive Podcast with your host, executive coach, and culture architect, Dr. Jody Faucette. Discover strategies and tactics that work positive as Dr. Jody talks with industry leaders who create a positive work culture that attracts top talent and reduces team turnover. Discover how you can create a work positive culture that increases productivity and profits. Here's your host, Dr. Jody.
Work Positive Nation, help me welcome to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast, my new best friend, Jody Thompson. Jody, welcome to the Work Positive Podcast.
I am so happy to be here, Dr. Joy. I think the fact that we both are cultural architects, we're going to have some fun.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You obviously are a person who loves to have fun, because who else would title their book, Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It?
Yeah, that's true. And, that came out in 2008. And at that time, it was pretty provocative and shocking to say sucks on the cover of a book. Today, no big deal.
No, Howard Stern made it a normal part of our nomenclature, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So what motivated you to write that book, Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It?
What motivated me to write that book, Dr. Joy, is that back in 2004, I was working at the corporate work environment at Best Buy, and the workplace is broken. It's totally broken. And what I was learning when I was there was that people wanted more control over their time. And they couldn't get that control because of the deeply held beliefs of how long people should work and where they should work and all of those things. So people were trying flexible work options. Okay. And let me just say to your audience right now, flexibility doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It does not create equity. And so in seeing that, and I was a change agent at that time at Best Buy. When I saw that, I started to work with somebody that was in work-life programs, and we started to uncover that idea of why it's broken and why we need to change it, and what are the steps to do that, to bring a culture from, the giant hairball, right? Yep. How do you get that to overcome inertia and start moving forward? So we had a lot of fun, but I got to tell you, coming in every day, having to be there at 8:00, sit in your cube all day, don't have anything to do, 50 million meetings. Yeah. It's not good for people. So it needed to change. That's why I did it.
Yeah, boy, I hear so many people say, I can't get my work done because of meetings.
Absolutely.
Most meetings could be replaced by a good email.
That's so true. But people keep going to meetings, right, Dr. Joey? I was just up in Vancouver, and I was talking to a group of 75 managers and above. And I asked them, of your meeting time during a week, like all the time you're in meeting, how much of that time is wasted? Yell it out. 50%, 80%, 90%. And I've been hearing that for about 17 years. Yeah. Yet we still go to a lot of meetings. So that's a cultural artifact that you have to find a way to break it. And that's what we did. We disrupted some of those things so that people could make better decisions about how they spend their time rather than wasting it in all these meetings.
Yeah, well, when we put them in nicely climate-controlled rooms with donuts and coffee and comfy chairs, what do we expect to happen, right? So it sounds to me like you're talking about autonomy, Jody. So how does autonomy factor into a positive work culture?
I love that question, Dr. Joey, because what people are doing today is they're doing policy-based hybrid. They're telling people what days to come in, like they can be 3 and 2 or whatever combination people come up with. And that's not autonomy. That's managed flexibility. And there's a lot wrong with that that equation. What autonomy is I'm self-directed and independent. I understand what I'm supposed to do, the accountability piece, but I don't ask permission of my manager to work from home or come in at 9 or leave at 3. I just don't, because when everybody's crystal clear about what they're supposed to be delivering, then autonomy is the icing on the cake, because then me personally, can move about my life and my day in a way that makes total sense, instead of rotting away in my cube for those 2 days I had to go in and get nothing done.
Rotting away. That's why work sucks, right?
Right.
Yeah, you walk in the office.
Right.
What's that odor? Oh, Joey's
Right.
over there rotting.
In her cube again.
Oh, my goodness. So the first time I was exposed to your amazing work, Jody Thompson, was probably about 20 years, almost 20 years ago. And we decided, we were talking a moment ago, it was that amazing article you wrote for Business Week. And that's when I was introduced to ROWE, R-O-W-E. So share with Work Positive Nation what that acronym stands for.
So ROWE is the results only work environment. And what that is it's a work culture where every single person, no matter what your role, is 100% accountable and balanced over with 100% autonomy. So when you put those two things together in perfect balance, it creates the absolute perfect environment for people to be their best every single day of their life.
Wow. Wow. That's big, to be their best every single day of their life. So it's results only work environment. How do we begin to measure the results?
Oh, I love that question. So Dr. Joey, when I go into organizations and I talk to people, just, groups of people, I ask them, what is the measure of your work? How do you know when you've achieved the result you need to achieve? How are you measuring it? And people just look at me like a deer in headlights. Yeah. Nobody's measuring, but you know what we are measuring? How many hours we work, how many meetings we go to. Yeah. So we're not measuring the actual work. And what's so sort of sad for me about that is we're spending a lot of time doing time.
Wow.
And the other place that people do time, right? Where else in society?
Wow.
Jail. Okay. So when people are feeling like sort of trapped in that kind of culture, they're quiet quitting, right? They're leaving for greener pastures. They're, doing as little as possible, whatever that looks like. And they're completely stressed out. Completely.
And stress is just as big a pandemic today, at least in the companies we work with. Stress is as big a pandemic as COVID ever was.
It's huge. I have a little nugget for you about that.
Yeah, what's that?
So I don't know if you've looked at Robert Karasek's work about the demands control conundrum. So back in the late 70s, he realized that it wasn't the amount of work that you have that causes stress. It was the lack of control you have over how you do that causes stress. And when we read that back in 2004, and when I was conceptualizing the results only work environment, I realized that what we have to do is we have to get clear on the results, number one. But number two, we have to raise our level of control to the highest possible level. Because autonomy is what gives people the control they need for all the demands in their lives, both at home and at work, whatever. So we have to raise that up. Flexibility does not do that. It's a managed program or a policy-driven program that manages your time for you.
And so we can't substitute what we measure for measuring hours, right? For measuring time and trying to manipulate that and where the butt's in the seat, right?
Right. We call that the old currency of work. Yes. Time plus presence equals results. And that is old. just because people are putting in their time doesn't mean real work is happening.
No. We find that productivity, how are you using that time? How much of that time do you spend in the flow? So it would seem to me that the greater control I have over my work, the more flow I can achieve, which means I can actually be more productive, which of course leads right to a positive cash flow for the company.
Absolutely. And that is the hardest thing in work culture for managers and leadership to let go of. Because when you let go of controlling people's time and location, then you're left with, well, what am I measuring? And that's the whole problem. We should be measuring the outcome of the work. What are the results we're trying to achieve? Instead, we keep defaulting to, well, if people are in the office, they must be working.
Yeah, well,
right?
what that really means is I can look where their eyeballs are and where their butts are, right? So there's that physicality that I'm managing, as opposed to doing the hard work of saying, okay, what are the measurable metrics for this position? What is their contribution to the greater whole? Because then I got to get out here and define the greater whole, right? And backcast that into what each position's purpose is, as opposed to this archaic archetype of measuring time and butts in the seat, right?
Absolutely.
So I'm working towards a results-only work environment, and I'm moving forward in that. How do I talk about that to top talent that I want to attract to our team? Because it's obviously very attractive, but what are some ways I can begin to talk about a ROWE environment, to a results-only work environment, to top talent that I want to come join our team?
So with Dr. Joey, we have a couple of organizations, large organizations that we work with in Canada. And for the last 5 years, one of the companies, the top number one reason, because they do surveys, that people come to their company is the results-only work environment.
Wow.
And the number one reason people stay there and don't go somewhere else is the results-only work environment.
Wow.
So here's the interesting thing, and I talked about this many years ago. By the way, people need to go through training to be able to use the results-only work environment. It's a trademark and it's copywritten and all that. But when you go through the paces with us and overcome inertia, there's your mindset is completely shifted. And so what we've learned is once the word is out that a company is ROWE, the people out in the world are looking for something radically different. That's why they're quitting. And people in the UK know ROWE, Australia, China, Japan, South America. We do a lot of work in Canada. The book came out in a few languages. So people know the word ROWE. ROWE is a branded term that people know.
Sure.
So if you put on your website, like on your page that you're trying to get talent, that we're a results-only work environment, you'll get bombarded.
Wow.
Now, again, to your audience, you can't use that. Okay, it's a registered trademark. You have to work with us. So we've learned too, Dr. Joy, that a lot of people, and I love this because they want to create that kind of environment. So I like when people, try to emulate it. But as you know, with culture shift, it's not that easy.
Oh, it's hard work.
There's a lot of things that people don't get from our book or whatever that will just keep pulling the culture back to where it was. So if you want to actually be able to drive a car that works, everything works, it has to go through the machinations through the factory.
Right.
You don't just get a big box of bolts and say, well, that's a car. Let me try to put it together.
Although I bought a car that was put together like that once.
Yeah, I've heard about those cars. Lemon. Yeah. Yeah, so it's hard work, and you understand that. And when leadership, like you just mentioned a little while ago, when leadership starts to understand the gravity of the real change, they have to like commit. Like, what is your level of commitment? Because you're going to need to commit to this, because we're not doing the change for the people. The change is cultural. It's everybody that's going to go through this. And we're really all on a level playing field at that point. Because leaders have to change their mindset. The people have to change their mindset. We have a whole bunch of activities, self-correcting activities people do to keep the culture going forward. That's the things we do in training. That's how we help organizations make that move.
So when I'm attracting top talent and I'm talking to them about coming to work for our team, autonomy is a word that we used earlier. So that's a way we can describe our work culture in a results only work environment. What are some other words we can use besides autonomy, Jody?
Well, people have described it as freedom,
okay,
liberation. I finally have my life back. You know, some people think of this, Joey, the autonomy piece as we're just letting people run wild and it's going to be chaos.
Yeah,
that's why people are afraid of it, right?
It's anarchy in the company.
Right. And it's the accountability piece that's so important. Because if you have just too much autonomy and nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing, like the accountability isn't there, that makes managers really uncomfortable. And so when they get clear, right? And so I think what's happening, Dr. Joey, with people is they don't want to waste their life, right? Get clear with me about what I'm supposed to do and give me the autonomy to be able to do a good job of it. And if you make me sit in a certain seat and get interrupted all day, I can't do my work. So I need to make that decision myself. Have you heard of Todd Rose's The Myth of the Average? It's a podcast. And this is the coolest thing. I think your audience is going to like this. So back in World War II, they were creating fighter jets, right? And they had to figure out in the cockpit where to put the seat. So they couldn't figure out how to do that. So they measured arm length of men and leg length and girth and all these different things. And then they put the seat, averaging all that out. That's where they put the seat. Now, here's what's funny about this, and I know you can see it.
Yeah, I can.
It didn't fit anybody.
Anyone. Yeah, find me an average fighter pilot.
Yes. And so when you think about that, what is their performance going to be like? So what happens in companies when they try to make things, equal, whatever that looks like, with 2 days in, 3 days out, whatever that is, it doesn't fit anybody. It doesn't fit any role. 4-day work week doesn't fit. So it's that idea that I need to be able at any given moment move my seat, like in the cockpit, to have the best performance. And that's why our seats move today in our cars, by the way. Just think if you had to get into a car with an average of everybody in, the United States. It doesn't fit anybody.
Oh, I couldn't get my knees under the steering wheel.
I know.
It's hard enough.
And I would be so far back, I wouldn't be able to reach the pedals. So there you go.
One of the best functions ever invented was this memory. So when you put your keys or your fob's got a chip in it, because when I get in it, it automatically goes back. When my wife gets in it, it automatically goes up. So
I've been in one of those.
Yeah. And hey, Jody, it's not just up and back. It's lumbar support, right? It's seat back position. So that brings me to something else. Results only work environments are defined differently by different generations. And we have, it seems to me, more generations working for the same company today than ever before, right?
Yeah.
You got the boomers, which are my generation. I think I can claim that for you too.
Yes.
And then, although you wear it much better than me, you're watching this on YouTube.
Sometimes I don't even want to admit I'm a boomer. So
I understand. Well, yeah, millennials, right? So those are my kids, and then Gen Z, and they're all in the workforce at the same time. I've got a nephew graduating from college this weekend. He's 22 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, hey, Joey, how would you as a 63-year-old manage a 22-year-old, right?
Yeah.
So how do we, thinking back to this seat metaphor, how do we, in a results-only work environment, put as many position adjustments as possible in there to accommodate all three of these generations?
So I love that question, Dr. Joey, because what we learned about the results-only work environment, because of the autonomy and accountability and perfect balance, it works for every generation. We've heard boomers and traditionalists say, oh boy, if I could have had this 30 years ago. Or I heard one person say, I was almost divorced. And now my life with my family is so much better.
Wow.
Et cetera, et cetera. So there's all these stories out there. Right. And so the next generation that's coming up, so we've got the millennials in there pretty much, is just like the millennials, they're more purpose driven. And if we can attach them to the purpose of the organization, truly attach them. And then backwards plan. So go back to my role is XYZ. And in my role, here's what I do to help us achieve that vision.
Yes.
That's what they want to hear. Now, that's Dan Pink's autonomy, mastery, and purpose.
Right.
But results-only work environment is it manifests that throughout the organization. So if I'm the next generation coming in, I get to come into a contemporary idea of work instead of an old-fashioned 1952, I tell you when and I tell you where. Old.
And it seems to me, Jody, that we are redefining work. We've had the great resignation, the great regret because we resigned and found out the next company sucked as bad as the previous. Right. So, man, what an opportunity for the great redefinition now. When you tell me that marriages are saved and that people are able to stay in intimate relationships like that, that tells me that any children that are in the home are living a better life. So the next gen is going to be even more advantaged. And it seems to me the joy de vivre of the human spirit is just celebrated so much more. And I know that sounds squishy, but that's when innovation and creativity needs to happen. And so you have this way of talking about, I want you to share with Work Positive Nation about how innovation and caring coexist in harmony in a ROWE work company.
That's a great question, Dr. Joey, because if you're truly innovating, it's uncomfortable.
Yes.
It sits outside of a culture because the culture doesn't understand it. And so when you come in with something innovative, people are having to let go of a belief system that they've had for years and their parents had and everybody had.
And there's safety and security in that belief system, Jody. We've done it this way.
Psychological safety. Yep. And so as you're helping people overcome those old belief systems that they have, you have to be able to be kind and compassionate at the same time, because if you can't listen to the pain and continue to reassure them that they're going in the right direction and let's keep going and here's what you can do next, they just fall back again. It's much easier to just stay put than to actually do the overcoming inertia thing. So we have to be compassionate. And that was something that I used to say to people many years ago is when you're facilitating culture change, you have to be Mother Teresa, right? You have to have that, sort of soul of I'm here to help and guide and not put you through, but you have to be a comedian too.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Right. And you have to be smart. Yeah, so you have to have all these things. But again, I say that if you're doing real change, real innovation, know that you also have to step back with kindness and compassion and caring while people are trying to follow you through this mud, right?
Yeah,
that's
it's
called
quicksand.
Change. Quicksand, even better.
You just get pulled in because all true growth, and from a personal as well as professional development status, lies just beyond the edge of my comfort zone. And so I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to be in pain. You just knock my block off, right? Because these are the ways
my cheese? Remember that book? Who moved my cheese?
Johnson, right? Yeah, exactly. Well, not only did you move my cheese, you moved my coffee, my granola.
Where's the refrigerator?
Yogurt.
My car isn't there anymore.
I don't know where. I mean, my wife loves to move things around in our kitchen, so the coffee makers rotate all around the place. So, but it takes me about 21 days to figure that out. But hey, in culture work, it takes a lot longer. So people think, hey, I can hire Jody, I can hire Dr. Jody and bring them come in. Hey, what do you think it's going to take? 60 to 90 days, we'll be okay.
Yeah, no.
How long have you been working out of this paradigm?
Yeah.
And how much energy are you willing to burn? Because it takes 90% of the fuel to escape gravity, right?
Yes. Yep.
Back to your inertia comment.
Yep.
How much of that energy are you willing to burn to make that transformation? And yet, look at the results, right? We attract top talent, we reduce team turnover, we increase productivity and profits. I mean, those are the benefits of rowing your way through work, right?
It really is. And I think sometimes like leadership understands what needs to happen. And to your point, how committed are you to it? Because when you're going through culture change, it never ends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, autonomy and accountability and perfect balance is an aspiration.
Mm.
And so for me to hit that, I'm going to be out of balance sort of for a long time until I can start feeling that balance come together.
I'm staggering, right?
Yeah, myself as a leader, you know, myself as an individual contributor, wherever I'm in the organization, we're all going through it. But what I love about this change is people in a cultural change like this, when given the right tools, they self-correct and they correct each other in a kind fashion.
Right.
So that's really cool too, because it takes the whole spirit of the organization up.
Yes.
When people feel like they're part of it and they have control over their lives and all those things that social science says is the right way to do it.
Well, and Dan Goleman, of course, helped us understand that with emotional intelligence, right? So what you're describing is creating empathy in the organization. And that's when it gets to be not only fun at work and it's a sustainable organization, people are in the flow, but you make more money at the end of the day.
I know, that's the thing. You know, there was a study done of the results only work environment through the NIH. So it was a longitudinal study. Mm-hmm. And one thing they learned is if people invest in the results only work environment, they get a 168% return on investment.
Wow.
That's humongous. Now, they also learned that they took a cortisol swipe. They took swipes of saliva of all the people in the study to see if their stress was dropping. The stress of the people in a row dropped. But what was so cool is the stress of their family members dropped too.
What?
Yes, actual, you know, biological testing of
amazing
stress, the stress hormone. And it's because the person is now able to fulfill their whole life. They're not playing games. They're not playing the staying late game. The look at how many meetings I have game. Look at how many hours I work game. There's all these games that we have to play and we're competing against each other instead of being with each other, you know, in a place where we're in an equitable place and we all get to have the same advantage.
And that's a true collaborative playing field as opposed to compare and compete. And there are only so many resources and my team's competing against yours to get those resources. That is absolutely fascinating, but it makes perfect sense because when I come home, I'm bringing that stress with me. And so I refer to that, Jody, as delivering the mail to the wrong address.
Oh, I love that.
The mail I wanted to deliver on my boss's desk gets delivered on my spouse or worse, my kid or the dog, right? Let's be honest.
Yes, right.
And so I'm short of patience and I'm just not at my best. So that's an amazing study. Where can Work Positive Nation go? What's your website, Jody, that we can go to discover more amazing things about our ROWE?
So the website is GoROWE.com, GOROWE.com, GoROWE.
Wonderful. And we referenced earlier to the Why Work Sucks and How to Fix It book. There's also another book you've written?
Yes, that one is Why Managing Sucks and How to Fix It. Okay. Now, we have to be very clear. We're not saying management sucks, okay? It's right?
Although that's true sometimes.
I know. But it's really that sort of how we've managed for the last 75 years. We're helping that change and helping managers. Actually, we take the word manager out of the system when we work with companies. They're results coaches.
Yeah, I love
because managers manage people, but results coaches manage the work.
Yes.
So now their control has shifted from controlling people to actually controlling the work, the outcome of the work.
And that moves the conversation from physicality, that is, I've got to keep my eyeballs on you, even if I'm spying on you through Zoom or something, right?
Right.
So I'm not physically making sure that your butt's in the seat and your eyes are where they're supposed to be and not on some social media tool. But I'm looking at how it gets done. And so it's totally irrelevant how long it took you or what you did. Do you remember, Jody, when we were in grade school, the teacher would make you show your math?
Yes.
Why can't we just focus on the answers, right? Just show me the answer.
I had a son like that. He just put the answer down and then he got a D on his paper because he didn't show his work. So yeah,
let's just show the work, shall we? Let's just show the work.
Right.
All right. So it's GoRowe, GOROWE.com that you can go to, Work Positive Nation, and you'll find more information about the books there. What else are we going to find when we go ROWE.com?
Well, there's a lot of things on the site that are fun to look at. So you're going to learn more about how we actually implement. You're going to learn more about why the workplace is broken. Yeah. You might land on my keynote page where I go speak, how we speak, I'll speak. And really we try to create the website to be an educational journey that helps people get closer to having the courage to talk internally about it, right? And come to a place where they're like, you know what, we might be able to do this.
Yeah, just start the conversation.
Yep. And we have a quiz. People can take a culture quiz to see kind of where they stack up. So there's some fun things to do out there. And I'd love to have your audience visit us and, just start your own journey, really. And thinking of work in an entirely different way. Yeah.
And by the way, Work Positive Nation, don't wait for your manager or your C-suite to get on board with this. Be empowered. Take a plunge, right? Just go ROWE.com and just find something. Just do the quiz and find out where you are. Just buy the book.
That's right.
And just begin that conversation. And then you can go to work and just start asking questions and just wonder out loud about some things.
Absolutely. One company we worked with, it took 7 years before they reached out to us.
Sure.
They read the book. They talked. You know how that is, meeting. Finally, they got to a place where they felt like they could just kind of look at it and see, can we really do this? So I encourage your listeners, start your own journey.
Yes.
Start thinking about it differently. We have resources out there you can read, and we want to be your guide, and we want to help you get there because it is liberating.
Jody
and like
Thompson.
you said, Dr. Joey, companies do better, more profitable.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it shows up on your financial balance sheet time after time, every single time. It sounds squishy when you talk about it, but if you look that these are people doing the work, right? Getting the results, then of course it's squishy, but it's hard dollars that come out of that squishiness.
Absolutely.
So that's a beautiful way to think
It's
about
a business strategy. Yes. Period.
And pays, as you said, how many times X?
168%.
Yeah.
Return on investment.
That's a big number.
That is a big number.
Do the math, right? So Work Positive Nation always wants to know, Jody, from my guest, what's one thing they can do starting today to help create a positive work culture? What's your one thing, Jody Thompson?
Okay. So this is the one thing you can do to start creating that environment. And it's a little nugget of how you communicate. Okay. So when you communicate with somebody, anybody in the company, and you're asking for something, be very clear on what it is and when you need it. Now, here's why that's so important. You get a lot of things like, can you get me that ASAP? Can you do it sometime next week? And so that creates anxiety and stress in people because then you start going, well, that's a VP. I better answer right away. And that's, a lowly person. I don't need to do that.
Right.
But if every single person, and you guys spread the word, say what you need and exactly when you need it. Tuesday at noon, Thursday at 5. When you say that, then every single person can start managing their time better because they know what people need and when they need it, so they can have more control over how they deliver.
Clarity.
Yeah.
We're communicating clearly.
What and when.
Yeah. Oh, I love
every email.
Yeah. Jody Thompson is my guest on this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Go ROWE, GOROWE.com. If you're on the Peloton or walking the dog or something, it's in the show notes. All you got to do is click and go there. Take a quiz, have some fun, buy a book. Go ROWE. Jody, thank you so much for the gift of your time, your wisdom. I'm even more in awe of your work and you today. So thank you for this conversation.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Joy. I was happy to be here, and it's fun. I enjoy talking with you today. Thank you.
Rowing is fun.
It is. Totally.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Work Positive Podcast. Please share this podcast with your friends who are HR and small business leaders so they can do one thing today to create a positive work culture that increases productivity and profits. I'd like to give you a free Work Positive course just for listening. It's called Something to Talk About, and it's transformed the work conversations of so many people all over the world. Get your free copy when you go to workpositive.today/something facebook.com/something to talk about, and you can start transforming your conversations today. Remember, it pays to work positive.